It was just another calm Saturday morning in our quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of place where the lawns are always manicured and neighbors wave whether they mean it or not. Birds chirped from the maple trees lining the sidewalks, and the sun cast a golden warmth over the rooftops. Everything screamed suburban perfection except, according to some, for one very specific thing, my truck. My truck was a beast, a matte black Ford F2, 150 Super Duty with custom tires, LED light bars, and reinforced steel bumpers. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a machine. Years of off-roading, cross-country hauls, and meticulous upgrades made it something I was proud of. Parked on my own driveway, angled slightly to the side, it commanded attention. And that's exactly what it got, mostly good, but not from everyone. Enter Karen. She lived 3 houses down, always in khakis and a pastel cardigan, with hair as tight as her personality. Karen wasn't just any resident, she was the self-proclaimed enforcer of our neighborhood's HOA. No one voted for her, but somehow she had a clipboard in her hand more often than her husband's. She walked the streets like she was inspecting a military base, snapping photos of recycling bins placed an inch too close to the curb or grass that was 1/4 inch too tall. To say she was obsessed with control would be putting it lightly. From the moment I moved in last year, Karen had it out for me. At first it was subtle, passive-aggressive comments during mailbox encounters like, "That's quite the vehicle you've got there. Planning to keep it in a garage anytime soon." I'd smile politely, say something like, "She's fine right where she is," and keep it moving, but Karen wasn't the kind of woman who took no as an answer, especially not when it came from someone who she didn't think belonged in her perfect HOA kingdom. The first official notice came 2 weeks after I moved in. A letter in my mailbox with the HOA letterhead typed in all caps, stating that commercial-grade vehicles were not allowed to be permanently visible from the street. My truck apparently violated neighborhood decorum. I read the notice twice, then walked over to Karen's house with it in hand. Her husband answered, looking like a man permanently apologizing for existing. Karen wasn't far behind. She opened the door fully, arms crossed, already prepared for battle. "Yes, I got this in the mail," I said, holding up the letter. "Just to clarify, this truck isn't commercial. It's personal property, registered, insured, and paid for." She squinted at me like I'd insulted her cat. "It doesn't matter. It's disruptive. It doesn't fit the aesthetic of our community." I nodded slowly, then offered a smile. "With all due respect, Karen, I don't think you're legally allowed to enforce an aesthetic. The truck's staying, and that was it." The battle lines were drawn. Over the next few months, Karen escalated things in the way only someone drunk on imaginary power could. More notices appeared. She filed noise complaints, claimed the truck's engine was unreasonably loud, even though it hadn't moved in days. She even suggested at a neighborhood gathering that we start implementing fines for unaesthetic parking. But here's the kicker. No one else in the neighborhood cared. Some of the kids loved my truck. I'd let them see the winch and talk about the mudding trips I'd taken. Other neighbors asked for help moving things. Even old Mr. Donnelly next door said it reminded him of the military rigs from his army days. Karen didn't care about community opinion. To her, this wasn't about one truck. It was about control. Then came the incident that changed everything. Early one morning, I noticed Karen standing at the edge of my driveway. I watched from the living room window as she slowly circled my truck, clipboard in hand. Her mouth moved as if she was muttering to herself. She crouched slightly, examining the license plate, then rose and pulled something from her pocket. At first I thought it was a phone, but it wasn't. It was a key. A silver key with a chunky blue tag hanging off it. She looked both ways like a thief in a cartoon, then stepped closer to the driver's side door. I squinted through the blinds. No way, I thought. No way she's doing what I think she's doing, but she was. She stuck the key into the door handle and jiggled it. My jaw dropped. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app, recording without a word. She tried again, this time using her other hand to steady the key. I opened the front door just enough to hear her. Come on, this is the one," she muttered. I stepped outside. "Karen, what exactly are you doing to my truck?" She froze like a deer caught in headlights, yanking her hand back so fast she nearly dropped the key. Her face went pale. Bad actors thrive. "Oh, I was just," creates CHECKINSAG checking for leaks, she stammered. "There have been oil leaks on the street end. This is part of my HOA inspection." I raised my phone, still recording. With a key, she didn't answer, just stared, lips pressed together, brain working overtime to twist this into a lie that would save her. I smiled calmly. "Thanks, Karen. I think we're done here." But little did I know she wasn't done, not even close. And what happened next would turn our little HOA dispute into a full-blown legal mess, one that Karen wouldn't be walking away from. Not this time. The incident with the master key should have embarrassed anyone into backing off. You'd think being caught red-handed trying to open someone else's vehicle would make even the nosiest neighbor reconsider their behavior. But not Karen. No, if anything, it lit a fuse under her. Instead of retreating, she doubled down. The next few days were weirdly quiet. No HOA letters, no passive-aggressive texts to the neighborhood group chat, no morning strolls with her clipboard. I almost thought she had decided to let it go. But that was just Karen preparing for her next move. She came back with a vengeance. It started with a special meeting, notice taped to every mailbox. Karen had called an emergency HOA session to address an escalating safety concern within the neighborhood. No other details, just that ominous line. I knew, without a doubt, that I was the concern. The meeting was held in Karen's front yard on a Sunday evening. I walked over with a folding chair and a smile, determined to stay calm. About 20 neighbors gathered, most of them looking more curious than concerned. Karen stood at the head of the circle with a white binder in one hand and a smug look that said she believed this was her moment. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began, raising her voice just enough to sound official. "There's been a growing issue regarding vehicles that do not align with the aesthetic and safety standards of our community. One vehicle in particular, large, black, intimidating, has not only disrupted the appearance of our neighborhood but, as some of you may know, posed a potential security threat." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. A few neighbors exchanged glances. She flipped open the binder and pulled out a printed photo. Of my truck, of course. She held it up like a piece of damning evidence. Several residents have expressed concern over the size and nature of this vehicle. It is loud, it is oversized, and it does not belong in a residential driveway. "Who are these several residents?" Mr. Donnelly asked from his lawn chair. Karen faltered for a second. "I've received multiple verbal complaints, and as HOA president, I have the authority to act when community harmony is at stake." Another neighbor, Clara, chimed in. "Karen, that truck's been parked in the same spot for months. No one's ever said a word about it until now. Honestly, it sounds more like a personal issue." Karen's smile twitched. "It's not personal. It's about maintaining order and preventing liability. What if a child runs behind that truck and isn't seen? What if someone scratches it and the owner causes a scene? These are valid concerns. It was an impressive performance, really, twisting non-existent complaints into imagined dangers. I finally decided to speak. For the record, I said calmly, my truck is fully registered, legally parked, and no one has any right to touch it, especially not with a mystery key. A few heads turned. Karen stiffened. That's a serious accusation. Is it? I pulled out my phone and opened the video. Because I have the footage of you trying to unlock my truck. Her eyes darted around as gasps rippled through the group. Trying to check for leaks. Wasn't that the excuse? I added. Karen stepped back, flustered. That video was taken without my consent. That's invasion of privacy. You were on my driveway? I replied, tampering with my property. The silence that followed said everything. She was losing them. The meeting ended abruptly. Karen huffed off into her house, binder clutched to her chest like a wounded soldier. The neighbors began packing up their chairs and walking home, some shaking their heads, others giving me apologetic glances. I didn't need an apology. I just wanted to be left alone, but Karen wasn't finished. The next morning, an official-looking document was taped to my front door. It was a citation fined by the HOA for vehicle obstruction, citing a made-up rule about driveway length and property lines. I laughed. It was like watching a kid with a toy badge try to write parking tickets. I didn't even bother removing it. I let it hang there, flapping in the breeze. Then I made some calls. You see, Karen assumed a lot of things. She assumed I was just some guy with a loud truck. She didn't know my job required clearance levels she couldn't imagine. She didn't know that truck, while legally mine, had once been part of a task force vehicle pool, and was still flagged under federal records. She didn't know how dangerous it was to try and access a vehicle tied to that kind of network, but she was about to find out. Meanwhile, Karen took her paranoia to new heights. She began photographing the truck every morning, standing across the street in her slippers and robe, zooming in like she was building a case for the FBI. At one point, I caught her measuring the distance from the bumper to the curb with a literal tape measure. It would have been funny if it wasn't so disturbing. She filed another complaint, then another. She even tried to get the city involved, claiming I was running a business from my home because of the size of the truck. All denied, all dismissed. Karen wasn't just being nosy, she was obsessed. She had built a fantasy where she was the guardian of the neighborhood, and I was the outlaw disturbing her empire. And when she couldn't control me through citations, shame, or fake rules, she turned to desperation. And that's what led to her biggest mistake. The moment she called 911. The moment she claimed she was threatened and assaulted by the owner of the truck. The moment the police came. The day Karen tried her so-called master key on my truck wasn't just the day she crossed a line. It was the day her entire house of cards began to collapse. It was early, around 7:30 a.m., when I first saw her hovering again near my driveway. This wasn't anything new. She'd developed a habit of walking by my house every morning, always slowing down near the truck, glancing around, pretending to look at her watch or mess with her phone. But this morning was different. This time, she wasn't pretending. I stood by the kitchen window, sipping my coffee as I watched her approach the truck like a burglar in broad daylight. She looked around to see if anyone was watching, unaware that I was doing exactly that, watching and recording. I'd already had my phone out, knowing something was off the moment she stepped onto my driveway. She was carrying a small ring of keys. Not car keys. These were old, school, skeleton-type keys, fat and clunky, the kind you'd expect to see hanging from a janitor's belt in a horror movie. She walked right up to the driver's side door and paused. Her body language screamed guilt, but the determination in her movements was hard to ignore. She seemed to genuinely believe she was entitled to do this, like the truck somehow belonged to her jurisdiction. With one last glance over her shoulder, she inserted the key and tried to turn it. It didn't work. She pulled out another and tried again. Still nothing. I stepped out onto the porch. My voice was calm but deliberate. Looking for something, Karen. She flinched like I'd caught her mid-theft. The keys nearly dropped from her hand as she spun around, fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, I didn't see you there," she said, as if this was all just a casual neighborly visit. "I was just checking. Well, we've had some suspicious vehicles lately, and I thought maybe this truck's mine," I said, walking down the steps toward her. "And you're on my property." She blinked fast, the words not quite landing. "Yes, but as HOA president, I have a duty to inspect anything that looks potentially hazardous. I have a master key that opens the community storage lot gate and some standard models. I thought this might be a standard model." I laughed. "Karen, it's a custom federal, modified F250. Do you seriously believe a random HOA-issued key would work on this?" She froze, caught in her own nonsense. The key still dangled awkwardly from her fingers. I stepped closer, holding up my phone, which had been recording the entire time. "I've got video of you trying to access my vehicle. You know what that's called, right?" Her lips parted in silent protest. "Attempted unlawful entry, and depending on the vehicle's registration, possibly tampering with federal property," I added, letting the last words hang in the air like a slow, moving storm cloud. That's when something inside her snapped. Her cheeks flushed red, and suddenly her voice pitched up, sharp and theatrical. "I'm calling the police," she snapped. "You're threatening me." I raised an eyebrow. "Threatening? I'm standing 10 feet away with a phone in my hand, watching you try to break into my truck." She whipped out her own phone and dialed, stepping away quickly toward the sidewalk, as if retreating would make her more believable. "Yes, hello, 911. I need police immediately. A man is threatening me on my own street. He has a large, dangerous vehicle, and he's filming me without permission." I stood there, still recording, watching her paint herself as the victim in a narrative she had fully invented. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from dramatic flair. She was putting on a show. I knew it. The neighbors knew it. And soon enough, the officers would know it too. She hung up and turned to me with a smug look, as if the situation was now under control. "They're on their way," she said. "I suggest you step away from me before they arrive." I didn't move. Looking forward to it. The next 10 minutes were long. Karen stood there posturing near the curb, pacing in circles and mumbling things to herself loud enough for me to hear. Phrases like dangerous man and safety violation and community risk. I kept my phone rolling, making sure everything was documented. The irony, of course, was that it was her 911 call that would bring her downfall. When the patrol car pulled up, she marched toward it like she'd been waiting for her moment in the spotlight. 2 officers stepped out, 1 male, 1 female, and Karen wasted no time. "Officers, thank goodness. This man has been threatening me. His truck is... Honestly, I don't know what kind of criminal operation he's running, but..." The officers looked over at me. I was calm, still standing beside my truck, phone in hand. The female officer held up a hand to Karen. "Ma'am, we'll speak with you in a moment. Sir, can we speak with you first?" I nodded. "Sure. I've been recording everything. You're going to want to see this." I showed them the video from start to finish. Karen walking onto my driveway, trying key after key, then calling 911 once I confronted her. As the video played, I watched the expression on their faces shift from professional to surprised. When it ended, the male officer asked, "Do you mind if we run the plates on your truck?" "Not at all," I said. He walked over, ran the plates, and returned a minute later, this time looking much more serious. "This vehicle is flagged under federal operations. You affiliated with—" I cut him off and quietly confirmed my clearance and role. His eyes widened slightly, and he nodded. The shift was immediate. They turned back to Karen, who was still standing with her arms folded, expecting applause. The female officer asked flatly, "Ma'am, do you have any legal authority over this vehicle? Why were you attempting to access it?" Karen sputtered, caught off guard. I'm the HOA president. That's not legal authority, ma'am." And just like that, her fantasy cracked. They asked for her ID, took a statement, then, without much ceremony, informed her she was being detained for questioning in a potential attempted vehicle tampering case, and possibly filing a false police report. I watched in silence as they handcuffed her gently, Karen protesting the entire time, claiming she was the real victim. But this time, the lie didn't work. This time, the consequences were real. The sound of Karen's voice shrieking down the block that morning was something I'll never forget. Even as the officers led her to the back seat of the patrol car, she kept shouting about how she had been assaulted, how her rights as an HOA president were being violated, and how she would have all of this overturned in court. Her words echoed off the nearby houses, but no one came to her defense. The neighborhood that once passively tolerated her behavior now stood at their windows, blinds tilted just enough to catch a glimpse of the drama. The 911 call she placed was meant to be her trump card, her power move. She thought she could flip the situation on its head with a fake emergency, paint herself as a damsel in distress, and watch me get hauled away while she stood victorious in her pastel cardigan and smug smile. But things didn't unfold that way. The moment the officers arrived and actually saw the video on my phone, it was like watching a bad play fall apart mid-performance. Her script was shredded and reality came rushing in. After Karen was taken away for questioning, the street fell quiet again. The same neighbors who had pretended not to notice the drama before now started texting me. A few even stopped by. Clara from 2 doors down brought over coffee, more out of curiosity than kindness, and said, "We've all dealt with her, but none of us expected it to go that far. She's been building to it." I said, taking the cup, it was only a matter of time. By noon, rumors had already started flying. Some said Karen had been charged with attempted vehicle theft. Others whispered that she had tried to access a federal vehicle and might be in serious legal trouble. A few kids even joked that she'd be sent to Guantanamo Bay. That part made me laugh, but the truth was, even I didn't know exactly how far the fallout would go yet. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the responding officer, the one who'd run my plates, and asked for my agency credentials. He thanked me for cooperating and confirmed that Karen had been released pending investigation, but would likely be facing charges. The main issues were unauthorized tampering of a private vehicle, filing a false police report, and attempting to access a property that had a federal flag on its registration. She thought the HOA gave her permission to use some kind of master key. The officer said, "I've seen power trips before, but that one's up there." "Yeah," I replied, "she's not exactly subtle." "Do you want to press charges yourself?" he asked. The question made me pause. Part of me did. Part of me wanted to see her sit through court hearings and feel the consequences of her nonsense. But another part of me, the rational part, wanted this to just be over. "Let me think about it," I told him. He understood. The officer reminded me that the video I'd taken was strong evidence, and that the more she tried to twist the truth, the worse it would be for her legally. I hung up and sat in silence for a bit, watching the neighborhood from my porch. Karen's house looked strangely lifeless. No blinds twitching, no barking orders from the porch, just stillness. I wondered if her family had finally had enough too, or if they were just hiding until it blew over. Around 4:00 p.m., I got another visit from someone I didn't expect. It was Mike, Karen's husband. I'd only ever seen him trailing behind her silently, nodding at whatever she said. But now he stood alone, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes heavy with something between embarrassment and exhaustion. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," I replied. I wanted to apologize," he said. "For everything. I didn't know it had gone this far. She told me she was doing HOA stuff, but I didn't know she was trying to open your truck." I nodded, waiting. She's not well," he said. "I think all this power stuff, it got to her head. She's been under a lot of stress. She thought she was protecting the neighborhood. She almost got herself arrested." I replied calmly. If she hadn't lied to the police, maybe it would have been different. He nodded, clearly ashamed. "I get it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and I promise we won't be bothering you again." He left without another word. By that evening, the entire street felt different. It wasn't just about the truck anymore. Karen had always operated on fear, on the idea that she was untouchable because no one had ever challenged her. But now she had crossed a line, and the police had made it clear. Her little HOA badge didn't give her the right to violate someone's rights. Her 911 call, meant to frame me as the aggressor, had become the very thing that exposed her abuse of power. A day later, an email went out to the neighborhood, not from Karen, but from the HOA board secretary, a mild-mannered guy named Phil, who everyone knew Karen bossed around. It read, "Dear residents, as of today, Karen has been temporarily suspended from her position as acting HOA president, pending further investigation and community review. We thank you for your patience as we ensure all rules are upheld fairly and responsibly." Translation: Karen was out. That email got more replies than any HOA message ever sent. I heard someone brought champagne to a block meeting that night. As for me, I didn't press charges. I figured the public fall from her self-made throne was punishment enough. But I did keep the video saved and a copy stored on a USB. Just in case, because people like Karen don't really change, they regroup. And if she ever tried anything again, I'd be ready. It was almost surreal watching the police officer lean into his cruiser and speak into the radio after running the plates on my truck. His brows furrowed slightly as he looked at the screen, then turned to glance at me, then at Karen. The look in his eyes changed, not alarmed but alert. There's a distinct shift in body language that happens when law enforcement realizes they're not dealing with a routine situation. That was the moment everything took a turn. Karen, meanwhile, was still standing near the sidewalk, arms crossed, radiating entitlement. She had the posture of someone who thought she was seconds away from getting an apology from the cops and possibly watching me get arrested. She probably imagined herself on the HOA newsletter, smiling under a headline like "Neighborhood Safety Hero Protects Community from Suspicious Vehicle Owner." The officers didn't move toward me right away. The female officer, Officer Ruiz, took a step back and motioned for her partner. He whispered something in her ear, and she nodded. Then she approached me again, her tone a little different now, professional, but edged with respect. "Sir, just to confirm, this vehicle is registered under your name, correct?" she asked. Yes, fully registered. It's personal use now, but it was previously assigned to a task force during my contract work with DHS. She nodded slowly. We saw the federal flag on the registration. Karen perked up at that like a meerkat hearing something suspicious. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped. The officers ignored her for a moment, focusing on me. Are you currently employed under federal contract? I still have clearance, I replied. Inactive assignment, but the vehicle is flagged in the database due to equipment embedded in it. I can show you the paperwork if necessary. That was when Karen took a step forward, flailing her arms like a desperate actor trying to reclaim the scene. Hold on a minute. That truck. You expect me to believe it's government property? That's ridiculous. He's bluffing. Officer Ruiz finally turned to face her. Ma'am, please calm down. Don't you see what's happening here? Karen insisted, her voice rising. He's threatening me, trying to intimidate me with fake credentials, and what? That truck doesn't belong in a neighborhood like this. The male officer, Officer Keen, approached her now, speaking more firmly. Ma'am, we've reviewed the footage and run the registration. You approached this man's vehicle on his private property and attempted to open the door using what appears to be a non-manufacturer-issued key. You also made a 911 call reporting a threat that we have seen no evidence of. Karen's face shifted something between confusion and panic. I was conducting an inspection. An inspection, Officer Ruiz repeated, of a personal vehicle. Karen fumbled. I have the authority as HOA president. HOA authority does not override state or federal laws. Officer Keen interrupted. You are not authorized to enter or attempt to open any vehicle that you do not own or have explicit permission to access. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her bravado was crumbling in real time, ma'am. Ruiz continued at this time, based on the evidence provided including video documentation. You are being detained under suspicion of attempted unlawful entry of private property, misuse of a master key, and filing a false police report. You can't be serious, she shrieked, backing away. I called you. I'm the one who needed help. And that's exactly why we take false reports seriously, Officer Keen said, calmly pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Turning a civil disagreement into a criminal accusation wastes our time and resources. Please place your hands behind your back. No, this is wrong. He's lying. You can't do this. Do you even know who I am? I stood silently beside the truck, watching the woman who had turned my life into a petty war, now being placed in handcuffs on her own front lawn. I won't lie, there was satisfaction in it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because there's something deeply fulfilling about watching justice arrive, slowly and undeniably, like a tide no one can stop. Karen's voice continued to echo down the street, but there was no crowd gathering to support her. In fact, a few neighbors emerged from their homes not to protest, but to witness. I saw Clara filming from her porch. Mr. Donnelly stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head like he'd seen it all coming. The officers walked Karen to the back of the cruiser. She was still yelling, demanding to speak to someone, claiming harassment, claiming the neighborhood was in danger. But her words meant less now. Everyone had seen the truth. The evidence was too strong, the lies too thin. As they closed the door behind her, Officer Ruiz turned to me. We'll be filing an official report and notifying both the HOA board and local prosecutors. If you choose to press charges, there's plenty of documentation here. I nodded. Thanks for handling it. No problem, she said, glancing at the truck. Hell of a vehicle, by the way. Yeah, I smiled. It tends to stand out. By the time they drove away, the sun had dipped lower. casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Karen's house stood strangely quiet, its perfectly manicured lawn now eerily still. The clipboard she always carried had been left on the ground during her little stunt. I walked over, picked it up, and set it neatly on her porch, like closing the chapter of a very messy book. Inside, I poured myself another cup of coffee. No celebration, no calls, just peace, finally, because nothing needed to be said. Karen had tried to use her imaginary power, her master key, and her fake authority to control something that was never hers. But in the end, she only unlocked one door, the one that led straight to her own downfall. The image of Karen being driven off in the back of a police cruiser should have been the end of the saga. In a rational world, that would have been enough to close the book. But Karen had never been the kind of person to quietly fade away, and even in cuffs, you could tell she was already planning her next move. I watched from my front window as the patrol car disappeared down the street, her voice still echoing faintly from inside, ranting about abuse of power and civilian rights. It was quiet again after that, uncomfortably quiet. The same neighbors who had once either ignored or tiptoed around Karen's antics now walked their dogs past her house with a little less hesitation, almost as if they had been waiting for the spell to break. Her porch sat empty, her shutters were closed, and for once, that clipboard she never let go of was nowhere in sight. I had half expected her husband, Mike, to come knocking again. He didn't, though a couple days later, I noticed a moving van idling in front of the house for a few hours. Whether it was for appearances, or whether they were packing things just in case, I never found out. But her front yard, once the fortress of neighborhood surveillance, now looked like a forgotten stage after a bad play closed early. About a week after the incident, an email was sent to all HOA members. It was official now. Karen had been suspended indefinitely from her role as HOA president. The message was signed not by her usual lackeys, but by the treasurer and secretary, who awkwardly admitted that recent behavioral incidents had prompted the board to reevaluate leadership ethics. In HOA speak, it was a full-blown ousting. For the first time since I moved in, a real HOA meeting was scheduled, one that wasn't just Karen holding court on her lawn with a binder and a whistle. This time, it was held at the community center down the block. No clipboards, no threats, no rulers measuring grass. Just people, neighbors who were tired of being bossed around and bullied by someone who thought she was queen of a kingdom she didn't even own. At the meeting, people who had never spoken up before began to tell their stories. Clara mentioned how Karen once fined her for having a wind chime that was too loud. An older couple said she'd tried to force them to repaint their mailbox to match the community color palette. Another neighbor confessed she stopped putting up holiday decorations altogether because Karen said they were a visual nuisance. It wasn't just me. Karen had been running her little empire unchecked for years. I had simply been the first person to push back hard enough that it all came tumbling down. After the meeting, a few people approached me. They didn't just thank me. They apologized for not stepping in sooner, for not saying something when they saw her stepping out of line. One man admitted, "I figured someone else would deal with her eventually, but when it got to your truck, and then the cops, well, it kind of woke us all up." It was strange hearing that. I hadn't done any of this to be a hero. I wasn't trying to shake things up. I just wanted to park my truck in my own driveway and be left alone. But somehow, that simple desire for peace had exposed years of unchecked power and fake authority. Karen didn't show her face for nearly a month. No walks, no meetings, No flyers slipped under doors. Her car stayed parked in the driveway, but the curtains were always drawn. It was as if the very act of being seen would have shattered whatever dignity she had left. Some said she was waiting for things to blow over. Others claimed she was lawyering up. But neither happened because something deeper had changed. The fear was gone. Karen's reign didn't end with a bang or a formal resignation. It ended with silence, a long, awkward, uncomfortable silence that spread through the cul-de-sac like fog. No one was afraid of her anymore. Her HOA badge, her real weapon, had lost all meaning, and the best part, the neighborhood started to breathe again. People put up lawn chairs. Kids rode bikes without being warned to stay off the grass. A few houses put up new porch lights, even if they didn't match. Someone planted sunflowers in their front yard, and I'll be damned if they didn't look like a little rebellion. As for me, I didn't change much. The truck stayed right where it was, on my driveway in full view, a quiet monument to what happens when you stand your ground. Every now and then, someone would walk by and give me a nod or a thumbs up. It didn't matter if they knew the whole story or not. They knew enough, and Karen, well, about 6 weeks later, I saw her again. She was standing at her mailbox, arms crossed, looking older, smaller. She didn't say a word, just opened the box, grabbed a few letters, and went back inside. She never looked in my direction. And that was fine with me, because in the end, she had tried everything: rules, lies, fake authority, even a 911 call. But none of it worked. She called the cops thinking they'd be her personal security. Instead, they walked her straight into a legal reality check. Karen thought she had a master key, but some doors, they're meant to stay locked.